Okay. Good to go.
15 minutes from now.
Okay, I'm Abby Officer, and this is my Understanding Human Society Community Profile. It will cover the case study, conditions and needs, area and history, who lives there, what's on offer, issues, social capital, services available, recommendations, and benefits in the summary. This is Roger, who's 72, widow, who moved to Silly Green, Sheffield, after experiencing financial difficulties. Roger now lives in a council house with dog Molly. Previously, he was involved in social groups, was physically active and socialised with friends. Since moving, he's been unable to make new networks and only interacts with local shopkeeper and GP. He has become very isolated and does not partake in any old hobbies and finds it difficult to visit his old community. Roger is representing elderly males within the area of high deprivation, living alone, and has anxieties and depression. Depression is a common illness, mental health illness. It affects people of all ages. Different levels of depression can be identified from how symptoms impact daily life. Signs include low mood, self-esteem, and tearfulness. Physically, people may have low energy, problems with sleep, or change in weight. Socially, people may neglect hobbies and avoid friends and family. Southern Green has high levels of mental health disorders, including depression and anxiety. High deprivation and social economic factors may cause this. Ethnicity and culture may influence people seeking help. Disclosure of the problem and expectations to mental health specialists. This relates to support networks and to traditional remedies such as religion. Findings show that older men underutilise services due to traditional masculine behaviours and thoughts. This meaning men avoid and use escape behaviours in depression and see mental health as a sign of weakness. As Roger is male, he is less likely to seek help, and his culture may make him less inclined to use mental health services. As he has no family, it may be difficult for him to engage or to be encouraged for treatment. Depression in the elderly. 1 in 4 elderly people have symptoms requiring treatment. It is underdetected, with fewer than 1 in 6 discussing it with a GP. Risk factors include recent bereavement, social isolation, loneliness, comorbidity, people living in residential care, dementia, and some ethnic groups. Research also shows that later depression is associated with increased risk types to dementia and Alzheimer's. However, as both conditions have similar symptoms and often occur at the same time, it may be difficult to determine if one results in the other. Age UK states that 2 million people over 65 have it in the UK, which includes 22% of men and 28% of women. From the 809 people over 65 in the Southern Green area, it affects about 204 people. Roger's needs. These are needs that are important to Roger. Reduced energy levels make every day feel like a struggle. Roger also has developed anxiety around leaving the house, which affects his love for walking his dog, visiting shops, or even find out what's in the area. This may be due to a preconceived idea of the area and its high levels of crime. About the ward. Southey Green is part of the Southey Ward, north of Sheffield City. Current population is 19,086. 10% of the ward is within the most deprived areas of Sheffield. Southey Green is 5th most deprived in Sheffield, with 67% of people living there as part of the 10% of England's top deprived areas. This affects levels of crime, education, and areas of skills and training. History. Southey Green is considered a new community in Sheffield. Originally, it was a small village that was mostly rural. Differences can see between Ordnance Survey maps between 1923 and 1934. Over 11 years, it developed into many council estates, housing families living in industrial areas of Sheffield. In 1923, a report was published by L.P. Abercrombie praising the importance of separating industry and housing and opening parts and spaces into expanding suburbs. People that moved into the area were those working in the steel and engineering industries. In the 1980s, there was a decline of this area of work, and as did the investment of the public sector, resulting in deprivation. Since 2001, it's become a part of a community-led regeneration scheme. Priorities included transforming local environment, forming stronger and safer communities, and promoting healthier lifestyles. Examples of improvements include the Southey Magnet, a local centre in the area, stronger community engagement that is driven by the people with a chance to vote, and Fibre Live magazine, which is sent out free. It keeps everyone up to date and provides information on what's new. This is a way of reducing Roger's negative opinions of the area. It also gives him a voice on how he contributes to future developments. Five Live magazine provides information about events that may be of interest to him and how the community continues to change for the better. Who lives there? Sadler Green has a higher than average population of community aged 15 and under. Stats show low primary school attendance with only 47.6% achieving 5 or more GCSEs. The lower age in Sadler Green is age 65 and above, which is 1.3%. This may result in fewer opportunities in the community as they are the minority and the voices may not be heard. Ethnicity, the population are mostly white and mixed white at 93.8%. Ethnic minorities may not fully engage in the community due to services not understanding their cultural needs, resulting in mental health going untreated. Focusing on the Sadler Green Road, the economic activity shows a large percentage of people who either work full-time or part-time employment. There's a high percentage of people that are semi-skilled or unskilled manual workers. People on benefits or unemployed are the lowest grade workers. It has been found that people with low economic status are associated with high rates of depression. Also not fair. There's part of Scots Park and Pavilion, which is the Sheffield Family Community Centre, where families can rent a plot to improve health by growing their own produce. There's outdoor areas for children as well as rooms that can be booked for clubs and groups. There's Longley Park, which has sports facilities including a bowling club, football and baseball pitch. And in the community centre there are groups such as Zunbeds, Esquire, Art and Bingo. The nearest library has reading for all ages but also advertises groups and job opportunities. Next door is a learning centre that helps people gain qualifications and return back to work. Other amenities include churches, shops, chemists and post office. The main positive characteristic for Roger is the open field areas and spaces available to walk his dog. Groups available may not be interested until the symptoms of depression have been controlled and has made friendships in the community. The library may be useful to him for providing information so that he feels up to date. Issues. Sadler Green is urban and built-up area. Environmental issues include urbanisation, which affects mental health and increases stressors due to pollution and overcrowded communities. The geographics include steep roads as part of Sheffield's landscaping. This may cause barriers for all the community, especially elderly with mobility issues. Research found that winter conditions reduce older people's mobility due to maintenance of the roads. Transportation. Most services are available by foot, however there are bus routes in the area and to the city centre, some of which have been affected by this year's bus cuts. Issues for Roger include increased anxieties around planning a trip or financial difficulties using public transport often, meaning he will not be able to visit the wider area. Poverty. Low social grade could be the reason for poverty, affecting people's ability to pay for services, transportation and consume a healthy diet. Research supporting that the poorer the people, the worse the diet. Sadler Green has a high levels of obesity which may be due to this and also links to depression. As Roger has many issues, decreases energy levels and does not participate in his usual active lifestyle, he may be at risk of obesity. Crime. The crime stats breakdown shows a large percentage of antisocial behaviour, and second being violent crime. This may increase mental health anxiety levels, meaning people staying more, becoming more isolated. Research found that people with street fear left their homes last to visit friends and family, restricting mobility and social capital. Roger does not feel safe leaving his house to walk his dog at night as there is a lack of lighting in fields and parks. Stigma and discrimination. The World Health Organization describes that stigmas around elderly people with mental health diagnosis mean they are reluctant to seek help. There is prejudice, fear and ignorance still focusing on these conditions. Ageism is an unfair treatment and discrimination because of age impacting confidence and quality of life. In 2008, it was reported that 2 million pensioners with depression did not receive treatment as doctors claimed their feelings were just part of ageing. The Equality Act 2010 is in place to stop age discrimination, and since 2012 it is now unlawful to discriminate people unless justified. In the area, there's high rates of referrals to services and mental health specialists for people aged 16 to 64 but low for the people over 65. 47 people are referred to mental health services from the 206 people living with depression. This could be due to possible stigmas or existing ageism. Admissions to the mental health specialist for people over 65 is zero. Times Change is a campaign that works with Charity Mind, aiming to stop stigmas and discrimination attached to mental health. Encourage people to have more confidence talking to others about their diagnosis through a range of projects. This is a charity that can be involved in local services, encouraging people like Roger to confidently discuss his diagnosis and remove stigma. Social capital. The Marmot Review 2010 looked at reducing health inequalities so that there's a fairer society improving health in the entire population. One of the policy objectives is creating and developing healthy and sustainable places within communities. Community is important for physical health and mental well-being. One of the ways to reduce community inequality is social capital. Social capital is a pattern network of a group of people with shared values. Research supports that high levels of social capital can improve health, education, employment and crime levels. It's measured by surveying community covering issues. There are three types of social capital. Bonding is close connections such as family members and people of the same ethnicity. Bridging is distant connections from people who work, friends from ethnic groups and friends of friends. And linking is the connection of people with positions of power such as social services and healthcare professionals. Research supports that social capital and defines it as social organisations such as trust networks to help create cooperation and coordination for mutual benefit. Civic engagement is the people that in the community being involved, such as volunteering, which can help strengthen society. Services available. A way of building social capital through the communities is through community services and charities in the area. It's befriending. Age UK have a scheme called Call in Time, which is for people 60 abroad living alone, away from friends and family, recently bereaved and isolated due to mental health and physical conditions. This is a regular weekly phone call that aims to combat loneliness. There's also lunch clubs for the elderly meet in the area, social groups involving gentle exercise with a social chat and drink after the session. Some of these services may not be appropriate for people like Roger. For example, for a befriending service, this would reduce loneliness at home but not sustainable for him living in the community and making friends. Walking groups are available but they do not target a specific target group. Walking groups. Research shows that walking is meaningful occupation through social connectedness, nature, sense of achievement and well-being. It links how this is an active leisure group with the use of occupational therapy. This is able to promote this as well being client-centred and focused on individual meaning. NICE guidelines issued mental well-being in the over 65 occupational therapy people, activity interventions, supporting recommendations for walking schemes for elderly people. Age UK issued a guide for Commissioner supporting older people services. It supports that promoting mental health and well-being in the elderly benefits the entire society as it maintains older people's economic and social contributions, improving quality of life and minimising care costs. Walking groups in place are low-cost, high-impacting services that support goals for the NHS White Paper. The value of walking is a self-sustainable group that supports social capital, finding value of short walks, regular walks amongst older people with health-related issues. Walking in a group is good for improving health, stamina, psychological well-being and self-management of health. Recommendation is a men's walking group. The group would be a mixture of short community walks outdoors and around the areas of Sheffield. It would be run during the day to avoid late nights and reduce anxiety to walk in the dark. The event location will start at the Learning Centre with a discussion of thoughts and then end with discussion of thoughts, feelings and areas they may like to visit next week. The group will be organised by an occupational therapist using core skills, encouraging meaningful occupation, grading, activity analysis, dual training and the ability to signpost all the relevant health services. Support workers and volunteers will help run the session. The OT will be able to set up groups for different levels of ability. Roger will be starting the beginners group, and this aims to grade his transition into the new community. Eventually, Roger can incorporate knowledge and passion for walking for volunteer in the group as a way of strengthening civic engagement. Benefits. Inequality, it targets men as they are less likely to seek help and it reduces stigma. For poverty, it's a free service with support from charities. The annual cost of depression was around 7.5 billion in 2007 and estimated to reach 12 billion by 2026. Evidence of walking groups reduces government costs. Exclusion. Evidence supports that groups involving social activity and educational aspects that target a specific group can help reduce social isolation and loneliness amongst older people. Identity. Rebuilds elderly people's identities back into community through meaningful and therapeutic activity. Social difference targets people of similar cultures as evidence supports is beneficial for the group. And diversity. Intervention means people at different level needs, beginner, intermediate and advanced walking group, which you will be able to grade for individuals. You're able to bring pets and bring their own knowledge of people that live there all their life. summarise, there's development in the area that's already going on, already a good range of services, the issues have been identified, there's limited physical groups targeting the excluded group, which is the elderly men, and then there's evidence support the recommendation.
Spot on. You've got a minute left. Right. Questions? Did you prime anybody?
Kind of.
And you stunned them?
Yeah, maybe.
Can I ask you a question? You did say there were about 800 people with depression in the area. Did I was just trying to think. What was the figure again? I know you said it. I know you said it.
Yeah.
Would a walking group be suitable for all these people?
Not necessarily, no. But my idea sounds silly, but if there's already a walking group in the area, it's going to help people that are isolated, that walk in the streets to see these sort of groups going on, and it'll build on social capital because then people are making more connections, even if it's a hello in the street, it's sort of building on that. Hopefully, they can signpost some sort of the services that might be better for them.
Okay. Now you did say there were some developments going on in that area, but
Yeah.
did you specify what kind of developments were going on? Or
Yeah.
have I missed?
Yeah.
Did I miss that? Have you linked that back to the walking group?
I'll just check. The magazine that's been sent out, I
Okay.
see that as used as
As a place to advertise it?
advertisement, and also the community engagement. People can vote. So they can obviously say what they want in the area.
Well done. Anybody else thought of a question? No. Stunned silence. Well done, Abby. It's hard to go up at first. Amanda, you're next. Your presentation is down at the bottom of the screen. So if you just hover on the P from PowerPoint, you'll just click on it there. If you click on the little, either on the top on the slideshow button, or there's a little screen at the bottom next to the 60%. That one, yeah, no, that one. That will allow us all to see. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Right, let me check the time. Okay. Yep, you're good to go.
My name is Amanda Zambasa, and this is my community profile. The content, it's going to have the history of Spittal Hill, what it is like now, the population, social grades, what it has to offer, issues faced by the residents, socio-economic issues, my target group, problems faced, finances, support systems, my case study, the physical environment issues raised, and the intervention. Right. The area of Bengreaves, Spittal Hill, started developing in the late 19th century. The area was mostly made up of Bengrave wood, which is why the name. Between the 18th and 19th century, this area was still very rural, with the only industry taking place in this area being small workshops, which made local tools and knives on a local scale. At this time, this area was considered a very good area to live in by a rich family. It started seeing change in the 1820s and 1860s due to the growth of population in Sheffield, which showed new houses being built in the area to accommodate factory workers. This dramatically changed the look of the area, and by the end of the 19th century, most of what used to be countryside had become houses, and this area was now considered a suburb. Even at this time, the area still housed an interesting mix of working class people and wealthy people. Both world wars brought great change to the area. council estates being built after the Second World War saw most of the affluent families move out of the area. The need for labourers to rebuild Sheffield saw immigrants from Pakistan, the Caribbean and Yemen move into the area, and this was the beginning of an ethnically diverse Bengrave. Furthermore, after the 70s, the areas became a refuge for people from war-torn countries such as Somalia, Eritrea and Iraq, making this area the most ethnically diverse area in Sheffield. By the 80s, the industrial decline in South Yorkshire had a very negative impact on the area, causing high levels of unemployment, which in turn brought poverty and led to the decline of the appearance of the area. Bengrave, Spitalhill is located north of Sheffield city centre. It has a lot of independent small shops, grocers, cafes, barbershops and hairdressers, and many ethnic shops which represent the many ethnicities that reside in this area. The area has a post office, it has surgeries, a pharmacy, and a lot of shops that people need in that area, so they don't really need to go far to get everything they need, even a big Tesco. Public transport is in the form of bus services 97 and 98 that are very frequent and link this area to the city centre. It is a very busy area and traffic is very heavy. Road conditions are quite decent. Side pavements are fully equipped and accessible for wheelchair users as well. There's a park approximately 5-minute bus journey up Bengrave Road. In the last couple of years, the Sheffield City Centre Council has launched a scheme whose purpose is to give businesses around the area a more attractive frontage, and this area has a mixture of different housing types ranging from council flats and houses, privately owned detached and semi-detached houses. According to the Land Registry, the housing in this area has an average of 49% social housing. This in contrast with the national average, which is 18%, so there's quite a lot of council houses in the area. The population of the area, this area has a lot of children under the age of 16, about 39%. This is a trend mostly found in areas that have a lot of social housing and in suburban areas. This area is known for being one of the most ethnically diverse neighbourhoods in Sheffield. In the population consisting of Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Africans, Afro-Caribbeans, Chinese, and a lot of the population being of mixed ethnicities. This cultural diversity is represented by the many different shops and restaurants you can find at Spitalhill. According to research, among the residents of Spitalhill, there is a high percentage, approximately 59%, of unskilled and partially skilled manual labourers and people that are on benefits, followed by roles such as administrative, clerical, skilled manual labourers, but with a very small percentage being in higher managerial positions. What is an offer? The area has got a library called Bengrave Library. It is fully accessible and it stocks music, CDs, videos, talking books. The library offers books in Arabic, Somalian and Urdu to accommodate the residents of the area. People can also use commuters to access the internet. The library holds social events and as well as offers various courses such as ICT. In the area there's a council hall by the name of Bengrave Vestry Hall, which runs as a community centre where events take place, social meetings and courses such as adult education and training take place. There's also a Christian centre called Bengrave Ashram. This centre houses about 6 asylum seekers at any given time, and it holds community events, and every Wednesday evening they provide food for homeless people and those that are in need. There is also a mosque located right at Spitalhill that offers religious educational classes for youth. There's a church as well. All of these things are pretty much around Spitalhill area and that is accessible either by foot, but if anybody needs, they can get the bus services 94 or 97. The issues that are faced by people in Spitalhill. Residents of Spitalhill face a lot of issues, and this could be a result of poverty due to unemployment or maybe a lack of education, or maybe it could be a combination of all these factors. Crime is one of the biggest issues in the area. Research says that even though Sheffield is reported to be one of the safest cities in England, Spitalhill is well known for gang culture and crime and feuds between gangs resulting in many acts of violence. Research also found that young offenders are invariably poor, often destitute, and are barely able to muster significant resources to subsist. Other issues faced are socioeconomic issues. As you can see here, life expectancy for a female living in mill houses is 86 years. Carry on to Bengrave and the expectancy falls to 77 and represents a decade of life lost to poverty, ill health, poor education and lack of hope. A baby girl born to a family in mill houses will live almost 10 years longer than a baby girl born in Bengrave, just because of their social and economic circumstances of their life. That, by any reckoning, does not represent a just or fair society or city. So living in Spital Hill. Getting around Spital Hill, based on what we've discussed so far, people that live in this area can attend community activities locally, could walk. Due to most of the activities and community centres being so near each other in the area. The area is, however, frequently busy and there's a lot of traffic. So for those that are in wheelchairs and for those that are blind or just have mobility issues, this might be a bit of a problem. The area has a lot of retail and catering jobs, and so most employment will be in restaurants or maybe in shops. So despite all the problems that are faced in Spital Hill, such as poverty and crime, it is a strong community that has quite a lot of facilities to help the less fortunate. So therefore, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that neighbours will look after each other in this area. And there's also a lot of community support and various charities that can be a strong support system for the people that live in that area. So I'm looking at people, young ventilator users. So there's an increasing number of young people that have long-term breathing difficulties that use breathing ventilators to assist with their breathing. New technology has made it possible for young people that have long-term breathing problems in the form of possible mechanical ventilators. These ventilators make it possible for these young people to rejoin their families at home. However, for this to be successful, there is a need for this group of people to have a well-structured health and social as well as educational services. The number of young people that need long-term ventilation in the UK has risen from 1 in 1975 to approximately 1,400 in 2008. Research states that young people that depend on long-term ventilation all have different conditions and diagnoses. However, they're brought together by their dependence on ventilators as a treatment for long-term respiratory insufficiencies. Ventilators come under two main categories, which are invasive and non-invasive. Non-invasive ventilators aid breathing through the external interface, such as nasal prongs or through a breathing mask. On the other hand, invasive ventilators can either be a tracheostomic tube, which gets inserted into the neck through an incision, or through an endotracheal tube, which is inserted through the nose or the mouth. Research states that while this group of people do not have similar conditions, there are quite a few physical impairments across the conditions that impact greatly on their functional mobility. An example of these are limited muscle tendon flexibility, joint or skeletal deformities, caused by either neuromuscular or musculoskeletal conditions, in addition to cardiopulmonary conditions. This group of people might require specialized wheelchairs for mobility that will be equipped to carry a ventilator. A lot of options are available, powered wheelchairs or manual wheelchairs policies. The Marmot Review in 2010 suggested that the healthcare for young people that are severely disabled or need palliative or end-of-life care were under the influence of social and economic factors. Even after this review and many others, not a lot is known about the actual mechanisms of community support and the actual impact this has on health, social and education training needs of the family and the carers of this group of people. Problems faced. Research states that young people that live on long-term ventilation significantly have lower quality of life than other young children. Staying at home instead of being in hospital brings many benefits. However, it also brings many health-related risks. The most complicated care is needed to support this group of people in the community. However, more research states that for young people that use ventilators, a carer's presence at all times makes it very difficult for them to form any personal relationships. Another problem they face is that it is very difficult for them to have an ordinary home environment. This group of young people usually do not get much privacy, not much independence. An investigation done on experiences of people who were considered disabled due to different illnesses found that this group of people had little to no prospects of being included into mainstream society. This went on to decrease their quality of life and their lives were reduced to a social death. Support for this point comes from another study which found that most young adults on long-term ventilation thought that they did not really have the freedom to go out and about in the community, and they felt socially excluded. Young people on long-term ventilation are a high-cost group due to their different and complex underlying conditions. There are benefits that people with long-term illnesses or disabilities can access. For example, personal independence payment, also known as PIP. PIP can range from £21.80 a week to £139.75p. The amount received is not based on the person's condition, but rather how the condition affects the person. An assessment is done to figure out the level of help the person receives. Reassessments are always being done continuously, done to ensure that the person's needs are continuously being met. If the individual's needs are great and take up most of the carer's time, the carer could also receive carer's allowance. However, some issues with PIP have been raised. Gentleman 2015 stated that the assessment process of working out the level of disabled person's need was not a precise science, and the process as it stands now is rather disjointed, which resulted in a lot of people not getting what they were actually needing. Support systems. Even though this group of people may feel excluded in the real community, this may not be the case online. There are many forums and online networks for ventilation users that may very well work as a support system that is more accessible to them, where they can meet people that are in similar situations with them, as them, and maybe even make friends. A brilliant example of using the internet to reach the masses was done by Nick Dupree, a well-known disability rights activist who managed to reach a lot of people through his campaign for disability rights through the internet. He spent a lot of time writing letters, talking to policymakers and the media. He also updated each step of his campaign on his website, gaining quite a following. His campaign resulted in 25 long-term ventilator users returning into the community instead of being kept in hospital. So my case study, Meet Mohammed. Mohammed, who is also known as Mo, is a 19-year-old boy from a Pakistani background, who is a devout Muslim who was born and bred in Spital Hill. In his infancy, Mo contracted a muscular dystrophy, which weakened his respiratory muscles, and this resulted in Mo depending on a mechanical ventilator to aid his breathing. Mo now uses a nasal mask to aid with his breathing, and due to his condition, he cannot mobilize on his own, so therefore he uses a powered wheelchair to mobilize. His mother is his main carer, therefore she is with him most of the time at home or in the community, and also helps out with his ADLs. Mo does not like to venture outside much, but prefers to stay inside watching movies or listening to talking books. He's really into science fiction. This, however, means that apart from his MDT team, he barely comes into contact with any other people other than his family. His physical environment. Spital Hill is a very busy area. Like I said, it's filled with many independent shops, cafes, and restaurants. He has everything a person may need. Therefore, Mo and his mother do not really need to leave the area in order to get their needs met. The roads and sidewalks around Spital Hill are all very accessible for wheelchair users, which makes it very easy for Mo to maneuver his wheelchair. He doesn't need to worry about inclines as his chair is powered. He doesn't need to travel very far to get to the GP as his surgery is very near him. There's also a pharmacy nearby for his medication and repeat prescriptions. Mo goes to his local library on Bengrave Road to get audiobooks every 2 weeks. However, even though there are a lot of independent shops and food places and barber shops, etc. at Spital Hill, Mo cannot access most of these as they all have a front step, therefore are not accessible for wheelchair users. If Mo and his family want to go for a family meal, they have to use a wheelchair-accessible taxi, and Mo finds the whole process rather stressful, so family outings have been happening less and less. Mo has stated that he doesn't want to engage in any community activities. Even though he's a devout Muslim, he barely attends mosque because he feels that people in his community always give him pitying looks, and this makes him feel ashamed of his disability, which makes him feel isolated. Moore has also stated that he feels that is a burden to his family, especially to his mom.
How many
Issues raised.
slides have you got left, Amanda?
Almost done.
Okay.
Issues raised are accessibility in the area and the stigma. The stigma of having a disability within the British Asian community of Southern Asian roots cannot merely be defined as stigma alone. With its ferocity and sheer scale of destruction, it is immeasurable. A combination of torments, ostracizing, treating with disguise, and oppression sweeps unforgivingly like a tsunami. It destroys all in its path, washing away the very essence of the person's self-worth away. The main areas of concern, from talking to Moore, the main issue raised was that he does not want to be part of the community. He does want to make friends and have a social life, but he's afraid that no one will want to be his friend. Therefore, he just doesn't try to engage himself. So, working together, Moore and the therapist decided his short-term goals will be a graded approach to help Moore become part of a community. A support group will be created through posting ads online and in forums. This support group will consist of young ventilator users from all walks of life that reside in and around his area, and also the rest of Sheffield. Twice a month for 3 months, the group will meet at Vestry Hall Community Centre, where they can talk about their experience and get to know each other and try to form friendships. When a report has been created, these members will start going for social outings, which will be the next step. For example, non-stressful trips like trips to the cinemas, as Moore really enjoys movies. The purpose of this intervention is to eliminate the feeling of isolation and social exclusion that Moore has been feeling through activities that are meaningful to him, and to help him gain confidence in himself and help him not see his condition as a barrier to creating relations or engaging in activities he wants to engage in. Further intervention can focus on integrating Moore into his own community. He could start by attending some of the events held at the local mosque, and then he can branch out into participating in other community events. Thank you.
Oh, well done. I was just going to say, you need to wrap up. Well done. And breathe. Any questions?
Did you find that there was like an issue around Muslims seeking like help?
Yeah, there is, because I found that there is quite an issue like with finding help, because being disabled or being mentally ill in the not just in the Muslim community, but in most ethnicities is like very looked down on, and there's a lot of superstitions into what actually has caused the disability. So you find that parents, families, not all of them, but most of them are ashamed of disability. So yeah, it's a bit of an issue to get help and stuff. And
Well done. Okay, take a deep breath. Any other questions? No? Okay. Sit down. Okay, Donna is the last one in this little block. And breathe. Give them a minute to quieten down. Okay. Are we ready for the last one in this little block?
Right, I'm going to talk about a village called Sykehouse. It's a very rural village in the Doncaster area. Discuss how its past has affected its presence and how its community at the moment impacts the case study of George and what could be done to benefit him. Sykehouse, like I said, it's in Doncaster. It's 12.4 miles away from Doncaster, and it was traditionally a farming village. It's predominantly white British, most people identify as either no religion or Church of England, though apparently it has a Jedi. Not sure what their
Just one.
religious needs are, but there's one. Most of the community is over 40 years old, and approximately 25% is over 65 and retired. There's only a very small population of children and younger adults. And historically, most people were employed in agriculture. However, due to the decline of small farms, due to higher land costs, more competition, agricultural technology. I mean, if you look at that tractor, they're massive. Some of them cost a fortune. Small farms are dying out. Bigger farms don't need as much help anymore. Like I said, they've got all the technology. So only a small percentage of people are now employed in the agriculture. And what's happening with a lot of the properties that are being bought by more middle class people coming in, it's quite a nice rural area, it's quite close to the M18 and the M62, so it's good for commuting. In and out, no problem. And like a lot of rural villages, it's lost a lot of its public services, community meeting points. It had a shop, that's gone now. It's lost its mobile library, it's lost its pub, it used to have a primary school, post office. Not here anymore. It also has quite a low crime rate, again makes it quite desirable to live there. House prices now roughly, a 3-bedroom house is anywhere between 360 and 425,000 pounds. And 3-bedroom houses are the smallest that there is there now. What happens is a lot of small buildings get bought and extended, and there's lots of lovely 8-bedroom mini mansions type things. In terms of its actual local economy, it has exactly 3 businesses. It has one pub, the Old George, it has an equestrian arena, and it has a fisheries, which both really attract people from outside of the village. They're not really for people who live in the village use. They do occasionally use the pub though. And the work that these businesses offer is very low paid, low hours, part-time, and quite often seasonal. So these rising house prices, lack of kind of job opportunities means that a lot of the younger populations that grow are moving out. See at the moment anyway. So it does have a village hall, it has a cricket team, and it has an annual village show, bonfire and Christmas market. That's about it. It does have a church, and as I said, most of the population either have no religion or C of E. Luckily it is a C of E church. However, anybody there who is of a different religion, I did say I don't believe it was 3 Muslims, you're going to have to go to Doncaster, which is 12.4 miles away. And if you ever want to have to go to any other place of religion on a Sunday, there's no buses. So you're going to have to rely on taxis. If you have any condition where you can't actually use a taxi, you need a wheelchair taxi, that's going to cost you at least £25 anyway. So you're going to really want to go to that church. So, I mean, the public transport is pretty shocking. There's 5 buses a day, they only go to Doncaster. It's going to take you over an hour to get there because it's a subsidised bus and it stops at every village you've never heard of on the way. Yeah.
Every lamppost, I say.
Yeah, that's it. So like to get here today in a car, it would take about 50 minutes. If you wanted to come from public transport, it's going to take you 2 hours. You're going to have to get 2 buses on a train. So surprisingly enough, not many people seem to use the service, and most people rely on driving cars. Now this is George. He's 76 years old. He's retired farm worker. He's widowed. He's got 2 children that live away. One lives abroad. He has COPD and osteoarthritis. He walks with a stick because he has osteoarthritis in his knees, and he does have concerns about falling. His knees give away once, and he's slightly worried about that. His daughter, like I said, his family away. His daughter visits every couple of weeks, and she does arrange for him to get his shopping delivered. But George doesn't live in the centre of Sykehouse. Sykehouse is made of quite a lot of small hamlets, and only the main road through the centre of Sykehouse has any footpath or street lights. So the roads near him, they don't even have really road signs because they have lots of dikes on either side of the roads. So because of his worrying about his mobility and where he lives, the bus stop's over a mile away, and there's no shelter, there's no seats or anything there for him to sit and wait, so he doesn't tend to use the bus. He uses taxis, and as I discussed, taxis can be quite expensive. Doncaster doesn't have a doctor's, his GP is the nearest one's 6 miles away. Obviously, because of his health conditions, he has to visit quite regularly, that adds up to quite a cost. So, what Sykehouse does offer George is has no interest really in fishing or horse riding. He's not especially religious, he'll go for significant services, but otherwise not. So he occasionally likes to go watch the cricket when the weather's nice, and he'll sometimes go to the pub when his daughter visits, have his dinner. But otherwise he mainly stays at home. He's quite isolated. Well, he's definitely socially isolated. Whether he feels lonely or perceives himself as isolated is a different question, but both social isolation and perceived isolation have been linked to higher rates of morbidity and mortality, infection, depression, risk of cognitive decline, and also the social isolation is linked to poor health behaviours. You're more likely to be increasingly smoke, drink, physically inactive, poor diet. Now, I mentioned some of the challenges of living in Sykehouse. It's 10 miles to the nearest supermarket and 6 miles, I believe it was, to the closest shop. There's very poor, like many rural areas, it's got very poor internet connections. So it makes it quite difficult for people who do use mobilities. As I've discussed about how long it takes and because how much taxis cost because it is so isolated. It's not just taxis, most services are quite common to charge more because you're isolated, whether it's a gardener to look after your garden because you can't do it anymore, or home care. You get charged for that time, that distance that it takes for them to get to you. So, and also, when we mentioned the bus service, it finishes at 5:30. So anything you want to do in an evening, you're going to have to drive or need a taxi. So, tends to rely on cars. As I mentioned, it's lost many of its social meeting points like the village, which further isolates the community and it impacts on the community. It's also lost a lot of its traditions. There used to be Christmas caroling, they used to take children around. They used to have an over 60s Christmas dinner, a Sunday school, there was a mothers and toddlers group. I mentioned the mobile library's gone. They were donating some books to the village hall so they could have a small one run part-time, but the problem is that's closing in the new year because they don't have enough volunteers to staff it. They have quite a few committees and they're all looking for extra people. They don't have enough people for all the posts they need for the parish committee, the village hall committee, you name it. I've also mentioned about the roads. I will say one thing for Sykehouse, it's nice and flat, so it is actually quite nice to go for a walk around and drive around. It's very green, not much hills. As I mentioned about the small footpath, also the roads aren't very well maintained. They don't get, most of it isn't gritted in the winter, and it's very low, Sykehouse, it's about 4 metres above sea level. So it quite often gets cut off by flooding. And in bad weather, the bus service is cancelled and taxis will quite often refuse to come out. So if you've got a car you can just drive in, that's up to you, but if not, you're stranded. So, and in the case of people like George with COPD, he's more likely to need to go see his GP in the winter because of the proclivity to get chest infections and such. And obviously that's most likely the time when he's going to really struggle to get there. So, COPD. As I mentioned with COPD, people with chronic long-term health health condition are estimated to be 2 to 3 times more likely to develop depression. NICE do recommend for COPD a range of evidence-based interventions, including regular exercise routine, and the most efficient way to delay the progression is to quit smoking, as 80% of cases can be linked to smoking. Obviously at the moment George hasn't quit. He suffers, so George suffers from persistent coughs, becomes breathless upon any kind of physical exertion, and frequent chest infections in winter. George also has osteoarthritis in his knees, which symptoms include joint pain and stiffness, increased pain and stiffness upon inactivity, a limited range of movement, and again, one of the NICE recommends regular exercise. And due to the symptoms of osteoarthritis, another common thing is it affects people's confidence in the mobility, which can lead them to stay inside more often. Doncaster's got a population of 302,402 people. 9,402 are estimated to have COPD. So using them, you could average it out to Doncaster should have approximately 14 people. But this figure is not really accurate. Doncaster contains a lot of mining villages which are statistically more likely to have higher rates of COPD, and also that figures of people with COPD who necessarily haven't had a diagnosis. So there could be people living there who don't know how to learn about it. So creating intervention specifically for people with COPD gives you a very small target and it's not necessarily beneficial. While COPD and osteoarthritis definitely impact on George's life, social isolation is also a major thing. And as we've discussed, Sykehouse has quite a large elderly population who are more likely to be at risk of being socially isolated and are more likely to have other conditions and comorbidities as well. So targeting socialisation, social isolation could be more beneficial. I'll get there eventually. So, as I said, it impacts on his health and well-being in a very significant way. There's approximately 100, I think it was 125 people. It said it was over 65, retired, and considered themselves in fair health or worse, which I'm not saying much to target group. So developing a group to target socialisation would obviously benefit George as well as the others. Social activities that target specific groups have been effective in reducing loneliness and having a positive impact on other health behaviours, including smoking cessation, but apart from drinking, that is the only exception there. George doesn't have much of a problem with that, phenomenal with that. Discuss physical activities, quite common, well, physical inactivity is quite common in people who are isolated, and it's beneficial for a range of conditions. It's recommended for quite a few different health conditions. So ideally, a physically active group, potentially something like footballs and gardening up there, would be more beneficial. However, the key thing in creating an effective intervention is to involve a group, the target group, in the facilitation of that group. So it would be best, especially in the case of this where you've got such a small target group in the first place, it's going to be essential to involve them before you plan the group. Sykehouse does have 2 community notice boards, one at the church and one at the village hall. It's a small column in a local newspaper, parish newsletter and magazine. So these could be used to help you reach your target audience and to get some feedback on what they would like. Sykehouse has a village hall, and about 7 years ago it's been refurbished. It has a hall, it has a big foyer, it's got loads of land around the back, there's a cricket pitch, there's changing rooms, there's football pitch. It's got a big kitchen, meeting room. It's got the little mini library, and it's got about 6 laptops, which I haven't really used. They're just kind of locked away. So this means for running any intervention, it's pretty much ideal. You've got plenty of space inside, outside, access to lots of different equipment. So if, say, when you meet the group, they don't want to do something physically active, they want a computer group so they can do some internet shopping, you could do that there. Funding. In George's case, and in a significant amount of the older population, money is a concern. As you said, everything seems to cost more than we live out in the city. The village hall has quite low rates, and if you're going to do a regular booking, I think it's £14 an hour. So even potentially if we paid £1 or £2 to cover hiring the hall and any refreshments that wanted to offer there. In terms of what group decides for equipment, charitable grants and trusts, there's quite a few that target socialisation at the moment. It's a bit of a buzzword. There's plenty of stories in the news. Age UK have launched a whole campaign around the John Lewis ad, nobody should be alone at Christmas. So, which means there's quite a lot of grants and stuff you could apply for. And the South Yorkshire Funding Advice Bureau are really great for helping you to find somewhere. And also sports. Charities like Sports Relief and schemes like Get Well have lots of funding. Well, opportunities to apply for funding.
You need to wrap up them.
Okay, this last slide. Challenges, the travel, even though it's inside Carlton, it is in the middle of this coast. If you're in the hamlets, it's a long way. Roads aren't bad. In the good weather, but when they're not, you might struggle to get there. There's the weather. Again, maybe in the ground rules set some things. If it's bad weather, do we want to cancel? If it's going to be something outdoors, you just want to do it in the summer. Maintaining the group, help with them to set it up. If there's enough volunteers, they could run it between themselves, but if there's not, you've got to have some sort of funding in place for that. And then getting to the people in the first place, they're socially isolated. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well done. Any questions? Any questions?
With this community group, you know, when you were saying that accessibility around Sykehouse area is quite difficult during the winter, but you enjoyed maybe going to the cricket in the summertime, do you think that maybe it's a seasonal thing where in the colder months, that's the time when accessibility and care should be improved, because that's probably when there's a huge increase in social isolation for the elderly?
I definitely think it should. I just think unfortunately it doesn't happen because of its isolation and poor road conditions. It is a problem. However, one thing the village hall does have is it has a whist group, which attracts a lot of people from outside of Sykehouse. But just because they don't drive, but you tend to find what happens is that people will pick up people on the way because they know they want to go.
What kind of group is that? A whist?
Whist, it's a card game. That's all. Don't ask me any more questions.
It's quite complicated, apparently. We've never played it. But
Yeah, so the play in groups of 4. I think that's the other thing. So they'll pick people up because they can't play, they're not players. So you do have the potential for that to happen there. Like I said, George can't drive, and I'm sure he won't be the only one in that public, but there will be people who can.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
So that.
do you think, because it's quite an old farming community, is there enough knowledge of each other? Will people look after each other?
I think they do at the moment, but I think
That's changing because
it's changing. The elderly population at the minute are the ones that grew up with that sense of community,
Yeah.
with the shop and whatever, so they seem to know each other.
Yeah.
This new population is moving in and nobody's really taking over these things, so they're not meeting anymore. And obviously with ageing population health problems,
So it's the older population, it's the people that were there that are still looking after each other, but what you're saying, the new people who come in and they'll leave during the daytime to go to work.
Yeah,
What you're
and
saying.
they leave to go socialise with their friends.
And they go and socialise because they're more mobile.
And,
They're not picking up that role.
Yeah, so, and it's like what I mentioned about the fact that the committees and that are all needing new
Yeah.
people. I went to Christmas Fair and I met one of the ladies who was on, I think, pretty much every committee in the village. She seemed to know everything.
Yeah.
And she did say that there's nobody on any of the committees that's under 50, which isn't.
Which does make sense from what you said.
Yeah.
Okay, well done. That's the first 3 out of the way. I'm just going to turn the recorder off for now. It's going to go